Hello. Right, this is the last recording of the week. It's the 28th of August, as was the last episode, which I just made this morning. But I think I've decided I'm probably going to do the Friday episode on the Friday, rather than doing it on the Monday and trying to remember what I did. So here we go. The boring news is, yet again, I was just doing the sort of media creation and processing process again. I stepped through a fair bit of it today, and the good news is I have very nearly finished it. The only thing that's left to do now is just the actual website end of things, which means, bearing in mind that I'd sort of created a post to handle the embedding of the video and the podcast and the text already, it just means I've had to go through a way of creating a template and then figuring out just one or two things about how I'm going to display images. And I haven't quite finished it, but I'm not very far off at all. So I think literally an hour or two into the next day, and that will be sorted and I can actually move on, which will be great. Right, so quickly to step through what I actually have done today. So the first thing was a decision to re-record the podcast intro, because the original was too loud. I did modify it in Audacity, but I found it clipped the peaks and troughs of the waves, which left it sounding a bit weird and harsh. So I figured it was worth just a few minutes to do a new recording. I did that using some of my newfound knowledge about how to use the shotgun mic on this camera. I turned the decibel, like I don't know what you call it, the volume modification down to -10 decibels, which did work. It actually left the recording too quiet. But in Audacity, one of the things you can do is amplify the volume, and I found it was easier to do that successfully than to decrease the volume. So I did that until it was just about the right kind of volume, and that is now sorted. One thing that's worth noting about that is that it did take me about an hour altogether to get that sorted. Firstly, VLC media player didn't convert the first attempt into an MP3 or whatever. I can't remember what file format now. It didn't convert the first file successfully. It just disappeared for some reason. So that took a bit of figuring out, and then also just working out how to do it in Audacity took some time. It's the type of thing where an experienced pro user of Audacity or another editing piece of software would have been able to do that in a matter of seconds. So it's frustrating that it took me so long. But figuring things out when you're trying to launch a business, or I guess do lots of things, is just necessary when you're in the early stages and you don't have money to spend and that sort of thing. So you have to get used to it, and it's kind of fun, at least once you get through something you have a sense of achievement, and also you are very knowledgeable about that specific process in a way that you don't tend to be, or really struggle to get to that level of knowledge when someone is telling you how to do something. Figuring out for yourself is a great way of learning. So I've just noted the fact that I could have used a freelancer, but I am trying not to spend money. And, well, this is kind of a repeat of what I just said, but to add to it, knowing the basics of how to use a piece of software or any kind of process, it kind of adds to your flexibility, and specifically an ability to iterate very rapidly when you're trying things out. It would be incredibly frustrating if I was experimenting with these videos and there was a point or multiple points in the process that I had outsourced and continued to outsource, and therefore had to wait until a third party got back to me before I could try different things. So that's a big benefit of doing things yourself. So then I got back to doing the bulk processing process. I completed steps for creating the podcast files and uploading them. So that was basically the creation of the audio file in VLC from the video file, and then a bit of tinkering in Audacity, which just means getting rid of the background noise, adding the intro, and exporting in the correct file format for a podcast, there are a couple of file formats you can use, I think. I'm going with MP3. I noticed after that Twitter is being automatically updated with the episodes of the podcasts. I wasn't sure at the time whether that was being done by Libsyn or Hootsuite. In fact, sorry, I'm still not sure about that now. And what I wrote at that point of the day was that I don't have the time for unnecessary checking of stuff like that. If two software products are doing a task and the task is being done, I don't really care which one is doing it as long as it's working. However, I did end up sort of accidentally looking into that a little bit more later. What happened next though was that I checked Facebook and Instagram because, as noted a couple of episodes back, when I set those accounts up and then tried to sort of sync them, tie them together using Hootsuite, I ended up getting barred from both of them. I think because it thought Hootsuite was a bot trying to abuse the system, basically. However, I did submit a review to Facebook, and that seems to have worked, because I can get into the account now and I could access the Instagram account. I would have thought they would have emailed me about that, but I don't think I've missed an email. But there you go, I've got access to Facebook again. I then realised that Facebook was also being fed episodes of the podcast with artwork and everything. It works properly, it looks quite good, and that was definitely being done by Libsyn, partly because it said so on the admin Facebook feed. It points that out, but also because the Facebook feed on Hootsuite was still disabled after it went wrong the other day. So that was interesting, because it made me rethink the situation with Hootsuite, because that meant that Facebook was being done by Libsyn. Then you've got Instagram in terms of what I was considering using in terms of social media channels, but Instagram I'm relatively disinterested in. I don't think it's particularly podcast friendly, and given that what I'm ultimately hoping to do is stuff around audio visual equipment, well, there are certainly ways that I could use Instagram, but for this first couple of years, I think, where most of what I'm going to be doing is going to be written content and these podcasts and videos, I don't think Instagram is really going to be very important to me at all. So I quite happily drop the usage of that, which just left Twitter, which is why I then came back to the issue of which of those two platforms was actually supplying the feed. I looked at Libsyn a bit more and recognised that when you upload a podcast to it, it has a section for putting in specific descriptive text for Facebook and Twitter, which means I am pretty much 100% certain it is set up to do an automated Twitter feed, and therefore I've turned off Hootsuite, fairly confident of the fact that Libsyn will do its job. So I've got to check that in a couple of days when I've uploaded something else, just to make sure it is working properly, but I think it will be, and that is a minor result, because whilst what I saw of Hootsuite is that it does seem to work well, albeit I spent all of 10 minutes messing around with it, so it's probably a good thing to use, but I just don't think I need to at the moment. I think Libsyn is going to do what I need for now, and as part of the deal of trying to keep this content creation to a minimum in terms of the amount of time it takes, being able to cut out one of the platforms that I need to use is worth doing. It's a good thing. So hopefully that's going to be the way that works now. No Hootsuite for now, at least. If this grows and builds, and maybe I add different streams of social media, or if it just becomes more important to what I'm doing, then perhaps I will need a bigger, more competent, more specific social media aggregation, is that a word? I don't think it is. A platform that will aggregate my social media feeds that is better than Libsyn, but we'll see. I think I've started saying Libsyn. It's Libsyn. Liberated syndication. Liberated syndication. Right, okay, what was next? I moved on to the final task of the built from scratch processing saga, which is to create a WordPress template for easy organising of the video and podcast embeds and publication of the transcript. So that's what I mentioned at the start. I therefore needed some kind of post duplication method. I had a quick Google and ended up checking out a plugin called Pods, P-O-D-S. Based on the reviews and what I saw of it, it's probably quite a good plugin, but essentially, having spent 2 or 3 minutes looking around it, I came to the conclusion it was probably a bit more than what I needed, and I really just don't want to spend any time learning anything at the moment other than what I have to learn, which is a lot. So I got rid of that and just went with a plugin that I think I've used before now and then. I think it's called Post Duplicator, or at least that was certainly what I searched for to find it, which has the very simple functionality of, in the posts page of WordPress, it adds an ability to simply select one of your prior posts and create a copy of it. It probably does other things too, but it certainly does that. So I created a copy of the first post and then just stripped out the specific content and turned it into a template with holding text and whatnot. So that's going to speed up the creation of new posts, which is going to be quite fast anyway. Bearing in mind, all I need to do is add in a title and description that I will have created anyway, then embed the YouTube video, which is like a 1-minute job, embed the podcast, which is a 10-second job, and then once the transcript has been done, just copy and paste that in. The only thing that's actually going to take any time on the posts is selecting an image to go with it on the articles page, and that will be that. How are we doing? 13 minutes. I used some notes from that side project I set up recently to help figure out how to set featured images to not show on the post page, only on the articles page. So if you don't know, featured images is the phrase that WordPress uses for attaching an image to a post or a page, that is generally then used in a fairly prominent way, perhaps as a big image at the top of their page, or in other significant spots. I, for whatever reason, tend to not like having a big massive image at the top of the page. I like using images in the post, but not right at the top. So I actually tend to want to turn featured images off, but then have an image input so that it can be used on the page that shows all of the blog posts as like a smaller image, with the title beneath it, just so you can get a bit more of a vibe of what the post is about. As I wrote in the notes I made at the time of figuring this out for the side project, this was an absolute pain to work out the first time round. It took me about 4 hours of hair-pulling frustration to work out how to do it. This time it took 4 minutes because I'd made notes about it. I'm a big fan of writing stuff up. It helps get stuff in my head as I'm going through it, but then also it is very useful in circumstances like this, where some weeks or months after you figure something out and you've kind of largely forgotten it, it tells you exactly how to do it again. I'm particularly a fan in this context of Google Drive and its search functionality. It's a really good, it has a great ability to search documents, as you might expect from Google, so that makes finding anything that you've written, if you can't remember if you definitely wrote something before or not, very easy to do. Final point is that I've written to myself, you just noticed in the transcript of episode 2, which was published on the 15th of August, you mentioned it might be a day or two until you're ready to do some writing, copywriting that is. That's turned out to be fairly ridiculous because it's now the 28th of August and I'm still realistically nearly a full day away from finishing this media production process. And even then I've got to do stuff like figure out how to duplicate the site and implement the canonicalization and the hreflang tags to make Google like the two different sites. That's going to be a bit of work to do. So I am, it has to be noted, a ridiculous optimist. I've known this for many years. I try to fight it by whenever I'm predicting how long something is going to take, multiplying it many times over, but it turns out that I'm still often optimistic, which can be annoying, but maybe that's part of what it takes if you're going to try a sort of big project like this. It would be difficult to get yourself to do so if you were pessimistic about things, I suppose, but just something to be aware of. And last thing to note for today is that I'm actually it's Friday today and I'm going to be on holiday Monday to Thursday next week, so there may be a bit of a content gap, but then no one's consuming this content, so that doesn't matter. So I'll see you next week.